like, Drew.
Drew! All right. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the counselor meeting. If you actually have the ability to meet with a counselor on the road. And as you know, that's going to take a variety of forms. Sometimes counselors are in meetings. Maybe you're meeting before, after. I'm sure you guys all do this, but the most important thing to do before you even start your school visit is make sure you understand expectations. The worst thing that happens is when you schedule your plan and you're with the students because it didn't seem like a counselor would be there, and then you're getting ready to leave and they're like, oh, the counselor's ready to see you now. And you're like, yeah,
Oh.
there you go. So that should always be first thing, is to determine like how much time you have with the student, is a counselor available, so you can judge your time and know when you need to go to the next school. That's like relatively basic travel planning 101, but just always a good reminder. So I wanted to break down sort of the 3 different types of experiences that you can have with counselors. You will sit down with a counselor, and it may be a counselor that knows Colgate, and basically they're going to ask you this question: what's new? And a lot of times they even just start with that, especially if it's a school that you visited before. So they might ask you, what's new? So we'll talk a little bit about what we say to that. There are going to be some similar things to the school visit this morning. Then there's going to be counselors that really know nothing about Colgate. And then that's going to be the message of getting to know Colgate and what we want to talk about there. When I go to Yonkers Middle Senior High School this year, and we have denied every applicant that has ever applied, my conversation can maybe focus a little bit on what's new, get to know Colgate, and then also potentially some feedback on applicants, how we actually talk about that with counselors. And then also we can talk about, what do we actually bring? Is there anything that we actually bring to counselors? Like, what should we pack in advance? Like, what are counselors getting in our email communication, which I found out is relatively limited, but we'll talk about that as well, just to know that the counselor communication plan is happening. So, Drew, you're going to be in Hawaii next week, 2 weeks. And counselors that know us are going to say, what's new? Or Emily, when you go to California, what are the first things you guys are going to start with? And again, pretty basic. This is just a little bit of review to make sure people are with us.
Bicentennial. Film media studies.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Trees.
Trees. Trees.
Just walk in and say, trees.
Trees. That's all we're going to say.
Okay,
200 years. Trees. We have 200 years of trees.
200 years of trees.
And there's a picture of a tree. Okay.
Complete illustration.
I know. And it's a great illustration.
Yeah, you would win in Pictionary, like.
Yeah.
Bet.
Yeah.
We're saving it.
We're gonna grade them.
And again, we're repeating a lot of the same thing. And
Say new residence halls.
yeah. And I just think the commons, talking about residential commons.
Carbon neutrality.
Yep.
Along with our trees.
Sustainability.
Record apps.
Goodness, well, what does that mean for my students?
Yeah.
Well, we got this GD thing.
We're the first school in America to have this early decision thing.
So, what do you mean by early decisions?
All right, for our recording here, we've got under what's new, bicentennial, 200 years with a great picture of a tree. Benton Hall, obviously talking about what that means for career services, residential commons, the new dormitories, sustainability, plan for carbon neutrality, and then record apps. It's actually fun that we have a year with a lot to say.
Sometimes it's like,
We do have our new film and media studies major. Some years that's like all you got is like a new major, you know, and you're like, oh, we're...
last year it was applied math. That didn't take
They
the
asked you
rappers.
what it was, and you're
Yeah,
like,
you're
oh,
like,
man.
We're applying the
Oh, too funny.
I got that question a lot, actually.
Yeah, so film and media studies will at least resonate a little bit better, and we can answer those questions about that. So I actually think there's quite a bit, you know, and I wanted to bring this up because that actually changes the scope of your time with counselors as well.
I might also add, and this may be location specific or depending on the group that you're working with, I think talking a bit about the DEI work that's happening, the
Yes.
President's Task Force.
Yep.
They're in the process of creating recommendations that'll be a part of what's to come of a new strategic plan for Colgate. So I think those are great things to mention as well for some communities or any community, that there's a cross-campus initiative that's bringing together different folks to think about what does diversity and inclusion look like
Right.
for staff, faculty, and students on campus.
Do you have, because I know you're on one of the committees, do you have, are there like plans or, you know, are there any specific, like we understand the concept of it, but are there specific talking points you could share out with us about?
You could talk about, so for this past year, there were year-long committees that met and produced recommendations that are then going to be compiled by Dean Hux and President Casey to help create strategic vision around diversity and inclusion on campus. And so the committees finished their work at the end of the summer, and now a smaller group is going to be tasked with taking each of the recommendations and working with offices across campus to actually implement some of this work. And some of it will include surveys and questions to students, staff, and faculty about satisfaction. Also reporting of incidents that have to do with racial bias and the other kinds of bias, and thinking about how that gets reported out. I know you saw when we had the incident with the Chinese students, there was a whole page talking about some of the follow-up from that. That was very much included in that work.
Great.
And will kind of be a framework for future incidences and how people can follow how campus safety or other outside organizations are actually investigating things that happen on campus, so it doesn't just kind of happen over here somewhere.
Sure.
And no one knows, so that's something that's come out of this work. And also, there's some charge to individual committees to do follow-up with different offices across campus to figure out how they collect data and then how data is reported out across campus to the entire campus community to understand like what's happening with students, what's happening with staff and faculty, who feel like they're getting what they need to be satisfied from this perspective in terms of campus climate. So there's a lot of different initiatives that are coming out of it, but I think the broader thing is to go towards the strategic plan.
Sure.
And having action items that come out of the work and not just committees that make recommendations.
And I think even the fact that we're doing this exercise, you know, I mean, I think that is not I don't know that for sure, but I doubt that level of work and those resources for that committee structure and support for a strategic plan is not happening on every campus. Is there anything out of Mosaic that's worthwhile?
Yeah, they are going to redo the weekend. So the weekend is going to become an annual thing, like for sure. Even since we didn't get to do it in the spring, they're going to have a fall program. Also, they are working to introduce an alumni mentorship program specifically geared towards students of color and connecting with alumni of color, and so that's going to be introduced at the Mosaics weekend. They wanted to do that in the spring, but because we didn't have the program, they didn't get there. But I think the fact that it's happening later, they were able to develop more of what that's supposed to look like. So I think that's a great opportunity to talk about like how alumni are still a part of the community in different ways, and that's one of the initiatives they're looking to do.
That'll be starting this fall.
Yes.
Great.
Awesome.
What else do you think we should talk about under the what's new category? Yes. It's not new, but that does need to be a talking point, as we talked about. You know, and I'm going to put here sort of where appropriate. And you've got to make that judgment call about, is the early decision conversation going to be relevant in that counselor conversation? Anything else?
With Benton Hall, what's new could also be reporting out the first destination survey results.
98.7%?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the reason I wanted to go through this exercise is because this what's new is very different year to year, and this is pretty substantive, and I think this is a really clear message of just the direction, the ambition, the vision. Again, we talked a little bit earlier about sort of the ideals versus the reality, but a lot of these things, this is reality. These are things that are actually happening right now, and that's a pretty impressive list of covering really all ranges and parts of campus. So, getting to know Colgate, I'm happy to walk through this section as well, but this actually can be very similar to what you talk about with students as they get to know Colgate. And where would you start? If you're walking in and a counselor, and I had this situation last fall, I was in Boston, and the counselor was like, I've never really heard of Colgate. And I was like, okay, let's start from the beginning. Where would you start?
Where we are.
Yeah, always start with location, sense of place. One of the things I wanted to make sure we did today, and we might be tight enough on time, we're not going to do this, but how many people have downloaded the admission PowerPoint pictures onto their iPad?
My iPad won't charge.
Take the keyboard
It won't charge.
Never mind.
That's all Alex can offer you. I would actually do a helpline request with IT, or stop over, just walk over and see if they can help you. I'm asked that about downloading because it is a couple steps and it takes a while, and it's one of those things that if you try to do the morning before the first day of your school visits, it's not going to work out well. So maybe today, even this afternoon, or at any point where we have some time during the day, if people brought their iPads with them, it's like I said this morning, let's block time to meet with students. Let's make sure we're taking the time right now. This is part of the prep. Do those pieces, because the sense of place in sort of pictures and bringing Colgate to life is good for students, but also may not be bad to actually have, if you're working with a counselor and want to bring up some photos, give them a sense of place, understand our location, community. What else?
We'll talk about what type of institution we are,
Yep.
residential, liberal arts and sciences.
Yep.
Okay, I think like I said,
Yeah, shared facts and figures about
Yeah,
the makeup of the student body.
Yep. I mean, and again, we know this, but I'm asking just so we can work through that process of, it's a little bit of a mini information session. This is where it's sometimes helpful if they don't know Colgate, if they sit in on your information session, because then it's a 2-for-1, and then the counselor conversation can be sort of a higher level.
I always talk about, after I get through location, type of institution, and like basic, we have 3,000 students.
Yeah.
I talk about our focus on research.
Yep.
And the faculty connection.
And this is where I feel like you take a little bit of a skeleton of our information session and you pull out some of the academic highlights inside the classroom, outside of the classroom, those bullet pointed pieces. And then obviously we're going to want to talk, just as we do in a session, about the outcomes piece and understanding. And then for counselors specifically, you want to do the app review. It's really important not only for them to understand who we are, but to make sure they understand who's going to be the right fit for our institution, and talk a little bit about our selection process. So if you're looking at your school group and you're noticing trends, who's been admitted? Did we waitlist everyone? Have people been denied? Are they sending us the perfect range of applicants? Well, first of all, how do you prepare for those conversations, and how do you begin those conversations? You don't just want to walk in and be like, you got it wrong. This is not the right match. How do you start that conversation? How do you prepare, and how do you start?
Preparation could be using our fancy query.
Alex's fancy query. This would be bullet point number 1. Alex's whole query.
Jumping off of that, it's pretty easy to pull through academic reading and testing scores
Yeah.
into that grade if you
Yeah.
haven't done that yet.
So just like, this is why. And this is, the beautiful thing about this too is slates on your iPad. Domestically, we have free data. You can access it in the parking lot of a school while you're sitting there awkwardly for 10 minutes before the school visit begins. But this feedback has to be based on data. You can access apps if you need to. You can really get in and have a really good summary. How do you start that conversation?
When it's bad news.
Good news is usually like, woohoo, the kids are happy. Because then you've met with them and you know the stories and then you can give them feedback on
Right.
what a great match it is.
Right. I usually start with, it depends on like who you're talking to and how savvy they are and where you are, but I think that sometimes people get really hung up on like the non-academic parts, but they're so great, how could you not admit them? And I'm like, at the end of the day, we're a school. And so I don't get to talk about the awesome kid who's super great, president of the student council, and is everyone's best friend unless they're academically within the conversation.
Yeah.
So I say, you know, if they are academically, you know, we don't have minimums, but if they're in the neighborhood of where we admit, then I get to talk about all that cool stuff, and if they're ED, I get to talk about even more. But I don't get to talk about the cool kids who are 150 points off of our low end of the SAT range, who have a 2.8 instead of a 3. Like, I don't get to talk about those kids. I get excited about that.
Right.
So that's kind of like a way that I bring it back to center and kind of wherever people are, kind of reformat expectations and just say at the end of the day, we do start with the academic piece and we do get excited about the rest of it.
Right.
But if they're totally off profile, I can't get excited about them.
Yeah. And I think an easy way to, you know, you just phase into that by saying we'd love to have your students at Colgate. It's great they're applying. Let's talk about how we can find a better match. And then talk about the application review process, the academic profile. Has anyone ever offered, we don't typically do this, but in certain situations, has anyone ever offered a counselor call? Because I think that's a good way, like we don't promote like, hey, we do counselor calls, but a lot of schools are shying away from counselor calls. And I think it's important to let a high school know that it's not necessarily going to change, it's not going to change the decision, but a counselor call can help you see how we're reading your applicants. So as we're in that point in time and you're submitting applicants to us, we can have a dialogue and a conversation about how we're reading your applicants and where the fit or mismatch might be in the application process. I feel like, and sometimes counselors don't even take you up on it, like they don't feel like they can, but for a counselor who's really trying to understand, they're usually going to reach out to you during the application process, and that's a good opportunity for a relationship building.
What about a situation where the trend is that we're not admitting students, and I've seen a couple schools in Chicago that we just
They're not
can't
coming.
enroll. We can't enroll anybody.
Yeah,
Like, why can't we enroll anybody?
right.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that could be a place if you have schools like that, and this isn't like our best data field because it is sort of sparsely populated, but you could also pull into the query like the plan to attend field. So you can see like if you're in Chicago, like are you losing people to like University of Wisconsin or like to Middlebury? And just seeing, is it because they are staying closer to home or because they are choosing an entirely different type of institution, or they're just, you know, looking at and like kind of committing to these like Northeast schools and it's just not us.
But I think all of those pieces are critical. Are they sending us the wrong apps? Are they coming and they're not enrolling? Are we admitting and everything's a great match? Then we have a lot of good things. We have a lot of good things to celebrate. But this all happens when you've looked at your data and you've prepared before a high school visit. And August is really busy and it's hard to do this. Like, this takes a lot of time. We almost need it like a whole nother month before travel begins, but we don't have that. But you really do have to find the time to make our, what was that? To make our travel really worthwhile. Otherwise, we're just spending a lot of money and we're not maximizing the contacts and efficiency. So what do we bring to counselors? We bring ourselves. We're carrying our nice little Colgate bags.
Great knowledge.
Business card.
Business cards. I bring counselor packets because I am assuming that not a lot of counselors know in depth where I go.
Sure.
But it might be good for Reach Regions to bring a counselor packet.
Okay.
Of like a little folder, and inside of it is the travel piece, if applicable in your region. Jameer and Mikhail and I were talking, you can even include Spanish fact sheet or Spanish financial aid brochure for them to just to show to families or show them where they're on our website. But give them something where like in a week when the 50th schools come through and they forget about you, they can reference it.
I'll be honest, I don't bring much. I bring business cards. I have stuff, but
All depends on your market.
depends on your market, yeah.
I tend to offer, if you guys want a travel piece, and like,
Yeah,
at least half the time you're like, no.
yeah, we're
Like,
good.
look at this shelf, no.
They
No.
tend to make it be pretty aware if they want stuff from you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty much every, at least, yeah, I would say pretty much every single school I visited wanted to take the travel piece, so maybe it's just my regions, but
I found that is very regional. There's like
Yeah.
areas with like a culture where they still keep a library and
Yeah,
keep
so
books
people-
and catalogs and, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
We are actually, I think I showed many of you this morning, but we're working on redesigns of the pennants with the new Colgate C, the Colgate word mark. Again, very region specific. They're an awkward size. They tend to get bent in your travel bag. But it is good to bring those. Like a lot of college counseling offices, we want Colgate up there. So if we even get the new pennants, like even if it's an old school that has our old pennant, you could actually even bring a new pennant. I basically told Stacy that like, we've been reluctant to spend money on things, and I don't want to spend a ton of money, but we can spend money on pennants, and travel with them. So there are pennants. Also, they ordered like 5,000 Colgate pens.
Your logo.
With the old logo. But Stacy is clarifying if we can actually use these for travel, but they're just cool maroon Colgate pens. Like, doesn't every kid want a pen?
For those.
Everybody wants a pen.
These are my confessions. I started bringing them on the road.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that if we do, we're gonna go through 5,000, like,
I don't give out
By
like
September.
candy, but like I just
Is
have
that
them with
okay
me. yeah.
Isn't there a, do you remember that last year in Summer Institute? Because that's just about fairs. Remember about like what we're allowed to bring for events and whatnot?
oh, at college fairs, you can't give out swag.
Yeah.
But a pen is different
But
because it's
still-
like a writing utensil.
Okay.
And kids can, they'll just take it.
Okay.
Sometimes they take it and then realize it's not Colgate and then they bring it back. That's always the best.
Yeah.
So it's just like a
And they
NACAC,
realize they don't want your big pen.
so it's just a NACAC
How is
guideline.
that advised
A NACAC guideline is that you can't give out things that are not like informational
Right.
pieces or whatever. Schools stretch this all the time. So like the Kansas giant Jayhawk thing has like deadlines on the back of it or something
Right.
like that.
And it's not that we would hand the pens out as gifts, we would just use them,
Yeah.
and if a student takes them, they take it.
Right.
So you
can't
put
give
like
out
7
t-shirts.
Colgate
Okay.
pens next to your inquiry card, and like you'll lose most of them in the first.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
So thinking
Sorry, I just
about
didn't remember.
whether people want to take like physical documents or not, like should we like, provide them with links or things where they can find some of this information if they want?
I think a lot of them use their resources. I mean, again, it's highly dependent on the school. But they have Naviance. We have a whole profile. So every school that has Naviance has a whole Colgate profile. It's got all the app information. It's got like a whole thing that we pay for.
But if they don't have that,
Yeah, so schools that don't have Naviance, I mean, a lot of times they're using the website. Some counselors, but though, are relying on like individual outreach to us as admission officers or yeah, even literature sometimes. So I think it's worth asking, like, you know, what can I do to help you learn more about Colgate or something like that. But
So there's two things, like I asked Drew what we're doing with our counselor communication plan, and last year we sent 4 messages, and most of them were related and around deadlines, around the application process. I think there's more opportunity, and I think Drew does too, for there to be more education surrounding the counselor communication that goes out, and that would be a really appropriate place for there to be potential links and things like that. I do think that we should offer to counselors, and maybe this isn't what we bring, but in this information, if they have a business card, see if they want to be added to make sure they're in the account, in Slate, and they're listed as a counselor, and then you can let them know that they'll receive periodic updates and communication from Colgate.
That's a good point.
They can always opt out, yes?
Yep.
Yeah, they can always opt out of the communication, but as we fold into our next section, which is gonna be sort of updates on the road, I don't wanna go there too quickly until we see if we're done here. You mentioned, Brittany, that you offer a travel piece and a fact sheet and things like that. I think those are totally appropriate. Most of the facts are in the back of the travel brochure. Totally dependent, you'll have plenty of those to bring, but the other pieces are just gonna be if you wanna bring some pennants, maybe in far outreach areas, you would prepare some counselor packets. In general, I typically might send those at a request rather than travel with a ton of them, but again, if you're in Alabama or outreach places where you just have to peddle everything you can. But I think there are a lot of schools that just don't have the resources for paper, so an electronic link communication would be better, and that's something I know Drew has hopes to do more with the communication outreach for counselors, and I think that would be helpful.
We are also we're expanding where we send what I call the beauty poster, the feature poster, whatever you want to call it, the big double-sided poster. So that will actually now be going to all schools that we visit, along with all schools that we have received more than 2 apps from, or 2 or more applications from. And to teachers who are Colgate alumni.
That's great.
Yeah. Those posters with
Everyone has them up.
accompanied by a letter.
They do.
Yeah, it's a pretty poster,
Yeah, I love them.
People love putting them up. Hopefully we'll see more of those on the road now.
Yeah, we have beautiful kids.
We do, although we
That's what I
were
mean.
right, and
I know, that was what a
Lori,
BS list.
ridiculous.
Pardon my French. But yeah.
Sam
I believe
Ryan
that.
was always like, I like that you also include a winter scene, that you're not lying about where you are.
I
It's
know.
always fun to see like which side they put up.
Yeah.
On side note, Colgate winter was so effective.
Yeah.
The winter cards?
I love
No,
those.
I used just like the actual,
The actual
I had
website?
it open
I love those
on the
cards.
iPad, and I would just have people come up, pick it up, spin it around, and then fill it in.
Anybody else use that? I
I
used
used
it, but I
it
wasn't sure.
throughout
if
the
anybody-
entirety of the
I used
summer.
the business
That's awesome.
cards these
Yeah.
past couple weeks.
I
Yeah?
just, I
Oh,
just,
good.
I
Did
just
you?
loved it.
Yeah, when I'm like in Shenzhen where they're having typhoon season and it's tropical, I'm like, check out winter.
Yeah,
Love it
maybe
too.
we gotta be
Snow.
really honest about
Yeah.
how cold and
But it's like
snowy and
it's-
dark it gets, but in
Yeah.
a funny way.
Right, exactly. Like life goes on.
Oh, what are seasons?
Does anyone have
Conversation.
Does anyone have any
Also
other
California.
comments about the counselor communication?
We'll let you know when and which emails, the content of emails that are going out to counselors. It's EDS as we go on.
Counselor fly-in programs. What are we
Oh,
talking about?
yeah, oh, actually, yes, I put it up there and I never said anything about it. So the counselor fly-in program for this year, and actually Erin can jump in if she wants, is gonna be early March.
Yeah, our counselor visit is February 28th.
It's scheduled for our third nor'easter this winter.
Yeah, this year I reached out to Shamir and Nicola and Julie already to have this on the radar because this year's tour, we're gonna focus on Texas, and then New Mexico and Arizona. Last year when we were doing the Southeast tour, we included Texas in that. We realized Texas could have its own tour. The other thing that's a little different this year is that we're inviting, it's going to be a range of counselors and schools represented. So we're looking at CBOs, we're looking at public schools, we're looking at independent schools. And I think one thing that we'll assess as a team is, do we go back to sort of a community-based organization visit and sort of doing an every other year visit where it's just the focus is more school counselors versus CBOs. But this year it's going to be sort of like an interesting sort of network within the visit. We just spoke, was it just earlier this week too, about, did we do sort of a different visit for community-based organization counselors and sort of look at the budget that we're having some good conversations in terms of like meeting people where they are, given their calendars and our calendars and getting them here. So the goal is to welcome about 25 counselors for the visit that's in March. I'm looking for a list of about 70 names to yield that 25. In terms of the Such tour, the Such dates are set, I don't know them off the top of my head, but they're the end of April like they were this year. The way that we are inviting counselors is we draw from 3 places. The Such deans travel, typically in January and February, and they focus on a particular region of the country. And so then we basically see who comes to the reception they host, and we invite them to campus. So that's one way. The second way is we had a Such website. It's now down because I think it launched in 2012, and I don't know if it's been updated since then. So we're working on updating it. And we drew a lot of interest from the website. People would sort of express their interest through the website. So we have a very long list of counselors who just went to the Such website and expressed their interest that way. So we've got the Such deans travel, we've got the website, and then we've got like our internal list as well, okay? So basically each of us at the Such campuses, at the Such offices, we get recommendations from all of you in terms of like, I had this great counselor, let's get them here. And so basically that's another way that they can get on the list. So what I would say is if you have a counselor who's just, who's outside those regions of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, and they either want to learn more or it reinforces some of the work and momentum, send me their name. And basically when I meet with my counterparts from the other offices and we're looking to finalize invites, or there's room because we have cancellations and taking a counselor off the wait list, we can use some of those recommendations. So, yeah.
And also, given the timing and deadline for Colgate in Focus, it's a little tough to promote necessarily in the fall, but you want to be ready to be able to access or follow up on any questions they might have about Colgate in Focus applicants. But you also want them to know this happens annually, so they can begin to think about it for their juniors. So that should be something that's communicated out to counselors and even to students in the counselor in the school visit. I want to talk really, really briefly about 2 important things, and that is updates on travel while you're on the road. Travel guides. Some people are really great at travel guides, some people are not so great at travel guides. Mari is going to be joining the travel team and taking on some leadership roles within the travel team this year. That is actually a key aspect of her professional responsibilities. And together she and I are going to be putting pen to paper and doing a travel strategic plan. And it's going to be very much dependent upon the work that individuals have done on their regional travel guides. So you all did data research to build your travel this year, and I think in a lot of cases it just hasn't made it, and I will say that for mine too, like it's on my desktop, it just hasn't actually made it into links in the travel guide. But we really need the travel guides up to date, accurate, data driven, critical, a real critical analysis of your region with goals, directives, plans, initiatives. That is sort of the overall expectation of the travel guide. So the one thing to do while you're on the road is to, in whatever capacity, make updates to your travel guide. It can be notes that you're following along. You can keep a notebook. You can keep, your comments secondary, but they do need to be brought back into the travel guides when you return from travel. That's going to be we typically have that update expectation in November. That will be the same, but we are being given additional staff. Obviously, we've outgrown our office. We are expected to travel more. We're expected to grow applications, and we have to be accountable with data, and we have to show that we're making data-driven decisions. So this is not just something it'd be great if you can do. This is something that actually we're expected to do as part of the work that we're doing with travel. The other piece is to make sure that the high school information in Slate is up to date. So Jenny and I were just talking about Milton Academy. Oops. Milton. There's no Milton Academy.
Good to know.
That would be great. Okay, so if we're gonna look at Milton Academy, there are some updates and things that you can provide while you're on the road. You're going to see here, we were talking about counselor communication, but this shows right here the counselors that are listed, who we have as the scheduling contact, who the counselors are. So if we're having a conversation with counselors, we can always verify that they're in here. You can always add a new counselor. You can do so by adding a new record. If there's holistic changes and their staff has turned over, you can actually ask your operations team member to check the website and update the contacts at your high school. It doesn't always need to be you, but there needs to be really good communication. The other thing we want you to be really aware of is adding any details into the high school visit. You'll see here, as part of the detail section of every school, that there is a spot for you to list in the website, the visit high school notes, and visit scheduling website. So this is a chance for you, when you want to make notes to yourself or whoever might be going to that high school next year, to say, do not follow the GPS directions that will take you to the elementary school, or parking is only available here. Like, this is something that's a queryable field that you can pull into, and this is internal. This is not being produced to anyone. If you have that surprise visit that you go in and it's actually a mini fair and it's not an individual visit. Keaton was telling me about some crazy school in New Jersey that does 15-minute visits between like an open period. This is where you should be putting all of that information. And this is probably where we have been, probably the biggest data glitch. Even talking with operation team members, I don't think they have 100% been updating this field when they're booking a school on rep visits, or a school joined rep visits this year, or they have an online platform. So be good to yourself by filling this in, or again, asking your operations team member. But anything that you put in here, if we go into edit, you're gonna see that the visit and school notes, it's a long block. It has a pretty long limit. You don't wanna be too crazy with that, but you can put some things in your travel guide that are thematic for the region, but if there's individual comments about a school, it would be appropriate for it to go into the visit and school notes section here in Slate.
Can I add one thing? You go back to the dashboard. I know we talked about this in terms of scheduling your visits and making sure there's data in there. This kind of jumps ahead to the sort of high school communication that will happen later. So Milton doesn't have a school visit, which is probably why this hasn't been updated. But we have all of those contacts in there, and none of them are labeled as the primary.
Yeah, this one should be primary.
And so if you have all these contacts, but none of them have that star, the communication that we've developed for the counselors is intended to send to whichever counselor is set up as primary. So in this case, where there are 6 counselors, none of them have that designation, none of them are going to get the message that reminds them that we're coming. So just make sure as you're, making things like rep visits or contacting, the person you've been in touch with is in there, that they have the star next to their name so that they will.
She now has a star. Yes.
And there's also the little, if you just go into the record, you can just click on the star in the upper right. You don't have to do that fancy way that Lynn did, so.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Good to know. Great. But again, as a reminder, you can go into the school and you're gonna see application statistics, you'll see applicants, you also have some of that in your query, you also have inquiries. But you can either look via queries before you're going into a school, you can pull up the actual school. And at Milton, I do just do a college fair, but that's a really good point about the making sure there's a scheduling contact. For every school that you're visiting, this is part of the operation team members check to make sure that there's a scheduling contact for any high school visit, so they do get the communication, but we do want to make sure as you're meeting with your operations team member that that's actually happening.
Something else too is that we may want to pull in college fairs for the Alex's awesome query sometimes, and we know that we want to have that information with those schools as well.
So not just upcoming high school visits, but
it will also include upcoming
I
college fairs.
thought you were wanting to send an email to the counselors reminding them that
No.
they're hosting a culture.
no,
Just so that we'll also
Just so you know,
Alex's cool query.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. we're totally at a break. We're actually running a little bit behind in like one section, but we can definitely do that after we have a break. Yes, we are videotaping, but we're gonna stop because we're done after. Let's, we'll bring pods up here, and there's actually extra seats up here so we can see. We'll bring some tables.